The West hypocritically continues to call for a negotiated solution. Negotiated solutions, moreover under Western guarantees, were reached in 2014, in 2015, and in 2019. In all these cases, the West's guarantees were destroyed by the West itself. They turned out to be false.
In a fiery broadside, Putin's top aide erupts that Russia will no longer take the West's so-called orders, signaling a hard break with Western pressure and mediation. Moscow is now openly targeting what it calls Western hypocrisy, blasting past peace deals as lies and false guarantees that were never meant to be honored. As the West's grip on Africa appears to weaken, is Russia seizing the moment to swoop in with new alliances and narratives, reshaping the balance of influence on the continent?
Our delegation has just met with Mozambican President Daniel Francisco Chapo. The conversation took place in a very warm and friendly atmosphere, which has characterized the Russian-Mozambican partnership for many years. President Chapo emphasized that the Mozambican people vividly remember the times when the solid foundation of our strategic partnership was laid. I am referring to the Mozambican struggle for independence. They remember how this support took the form of advice, the sharing of expertise, and arms deliveries. And this memory is enshrined, as you know, in Mozambique's national symbols, which feature the Kalashnikov assault rifle. And when victory over the colonizers was achieved, on the very day that Mozambique's independence was declared, our country, the Soviet Union, recognized a new, young state. In the subsequent phase of our bilateral relations, our country actively supported the establishment of state institutions, the laying of the foundations for an independent national economy, and reforms in the field of education. And today, the President recalled this with great warmth, emphasizing that the Mozambicans remember this and wish to build our relations on the solid foundation as we enter a new era. The economy, of course, plays a key role here. Today, Africa as a whole is experiencing a second awakening, so to speak, because even after gaining political independence, many countries still remain deeply and severely economically dependent on their former colonial powers and other Western nations. Africans are quite rightly concerned that their abundant natural resources should not be exported abroad in their raw form, but rather processed locally so that added value is generated in the very countries where these natural resources are sourced. It was precisely in line with this logic that President Chapo shared with us today his ideas on implementing further reforms in Mozambique's economy and the opportunities he sees in the development of our bilateral cooperation. In this regard, we agreed to take into account key aspects of Mozambique's plans for economic reform and modernization as we prepare for the next meeting of the Russian-Mozambican Intergovernmental Trade and Economic Commission. Another area of focus for our strategic partnership in the coming period is a joint fight against terrorism. Russia is ready to respond to the request from our Mozambican friends regarding the support we can provide in eliminating the terrorist threat that persists in the north of the country. Of course, we discuss international issues. We coordinate very closely on most issues at the United Nations and other international forums. We will discuss the foreign policy aspects of our partnership in greater detail with the Foreign Minister.
As we discussed earlier, Minister Lavrov held a meeting with President Daniel Francisco Chapo, which took place in a warm atmosphere of humanity and solidarity, taking into account the special historical and strategic relations that we have with the Russian Federation. I think Minister Lavrov himself will confirm that his visit to Mozambique can already be considered a record-breaking one, compared to visits to many countries in sub-Saharan Africa. So this serves as clear evidence of a historical and special relationship that we have with Russia. So we would like to welcome you once again to Mozambique.
Last year, we marked the 50th anniversary of our diplomatic relations. Exactly on the day Mozambique declared independence, the Soviet Union was one of the first, if not the very first, to recognize the new state and continue close cooperation with the Mozambicans, with whom it had forged close ties and mutual support during the struggle for independence. Our solidarity during that historical era of decolonization laid a solid foundation for the further development of friendship, partnership, and cooperation. At this stage, As discussed at the meeting with President Chapo, the main task is to ensure the implementation of additional economic projects that should be carried out in order to promote both Mozambique's economic independence and its right to choose its own partners in the international arena. I hope that today we will discuss in detail how our foreign ministry can actively and effectively facilitate these processes.
We are also talking about the situation of Russia's conflict with Ukraine. We, Mozambique and Africa, are in favor of dialogue, in favor of an agreement and a peaceful solution to this conflict. We are also talking about the situation in the Gulf, and we convey the impression that here in Mozambique many of our products, as well as other products, have risen in price by almost 40%, affecting daily life. We spoke with the Muslims. We talked about the need for two states in communication between Israel and Palestine in the situation of Palestine. We review the situation at the national, regional, continental, and global levels. We also reviewed our bilateral cooperation in various areas in which Russia supports us. We identified some areas that we will consolidate when we see the Mr. Commission, which may take place in September. The Mr. Commission, Mozambique, Russia, which will take place in September. So, we will consolidate the economic areas that we must strengthen. Therefore, we identify these areas and support the fight against terrorism. We continue to work.
We will continue to provide Mozambique with assistance in overcoming the consequences of natural disasters, both through bilateral channels and through the World Food Programme. Last year, we expanded the number of scholarships provided to our Mozambican friends. Today, we confirmed our readiness to allocate an additional number of scholarships if there's interest. Issues concerning the African continent, including the situation in the Sahara-Sahel zone, the conflict between the Democratic Republic of the Congo and Rwanda, and other crisis points. We advocate their settlement through negotiations while simultaneously suppressing terrorist threats, which on the continent, unfortunately, are not disappearing anywhere. Moreover, recently in these terrorist raids, Ukrainian mercenaries have begun to be actively used. The West hypocritically continues to call for a negotiated solution. Negotiated solutions, moreover under Western guarantees, were reached in 2014, in 2015, and in 2019. In all these cases, the West's guarantees were destroyed by the West itself. They turned out to be false. And in exactly the same way, in 2022 there was already a negotiated solution between Russia and Ukraine, and it was undermined by that same West openly and publicly. So we will no longer believe the West when it says it wants negotiated solutions. This reserve of goodwill and hope has been exhausted completely. We appreciate Mozambique's understanding of the root causes of the conflict, for their balanced, well-founded and responsible position, which they take on these issues in the United Nations, without supporting the West's attempt to Ukrainize almost the entire agenda of the World Organization. We have a common position regarding the events around Iran in the Strait of Hormuz in a broader sense, in the Persian Gulf, and we proceed from the fact that, of course, this conflict must be ended, and it can be ended only by an agreement reflecting the interests of all parties, not only Iran, its neighbors, and the United States, but all countries that in one way or another suffer from a negative impact on the world economy in the current situation.